as we gather in community in a time of, well, interesting times. And we feel so fortunate to have Saeed here tonight at this critical juncture and try to give us a little bit of a picture of where we stand in the evolution of what? In the evolution of. So, last month we had Kirk Schneider here for the topic on the polarization of the psyche, and this kind of bookends it. We're getting closer to the election, and maybe we'll be peaceful here tonight, but plenty of polarization to go around. So I just say welcome and thanks to Victoria and I and Evan and people who have done the setup here tonight, and to Tom Habib, who's arranged this event to bring Saeed to the audience. So let me give a big welcome to Tom, who will do the introductions.
Can you hear me okay without the mic?
Yeah.
So it's my honor to introduce Saeed Dawlabani to the CIP community. The Center for Integrative Psychology's mission is to expose future psychologists to the leading thinkers and theories that are out there, like integral theory and spiral dynamics, so that these future practitioners of the mind have a breadth of training commensurate with the scope of the field of study, nothing less than the human condition. We're on the eve of an election where unintegrated American shadow has emerged as a right populist ideology, in part due to rapid cultural and economic challenges and changes. Many progressives, including myself, wrongly assume that the green values of pluralism were more widely held until recent events in Brexit in Britain and also in France. As evidenced by the rise of Mr. Trump. There's no doubt that folks feel disenfranchised out there. They feel unheard and angry, regardless of their interpretations of why and their reasons for the root causes. They feel that many of their values no longer seem relevant or valued. Saeed Dawlabani will examine this conservative tsunami from a value system-based perspective, widely known as spiral dynamics. How many of you are familiar with spiral? Good, just about what we thought. Saeed is a cultural economist. Boy, that one just sticks right in the gullet. Economist, thank you.
Just a fancy title.
Writer and theorist and speaker. He's the author of Memenomics. Thank you, Elsa. Saeed was a keynote speaker at the Integral European Conference in Hungary earlier this year. In my opinion and others, his presentation was one of the conference's most notable events. In his application of spiral dynamics, Saeed is carrying forth the work of Claire Graves, who was a psychologist in the 50s. Psychologists have a very important role in Integral. Integral loves our developmental perspectives. Who and Don Beck got involved with Claire Graves in around 1974. He was a psychologist located in Texas, I believe, at that point. Beck and Collins widely disseminated Claire Graves' work, and they had written a book together. Saeed has worked closely with Beck at conferences and in applied work throughout the world. Of note, his wife, Elsa Balouf, we rehearsed that. has been widely recognized in the integral community. And Elzer has gone to Lebanon and trained 700 people in the spiral dynamics. Oh, I'm sorry, Palestine, right? 700 people she trained. And she told me tonight it was the women that were able to read the green stages and couldn't get beyond the blue levels. Okay, where am I? Elser and Saeed's warning still rings in my ear that to use our green pluralistic values when we're dealing with people that are in the red level is both foolish and potentially dangerous, something the conservatives might appreciate, perhaps for the wrong reason. And it is our tendency to do that, to see it from our perspective. As we look back on Mr. Trump, we can't understand him from our perspective. We need to drop into that level to do it. So regarding tonight's topic and his book, Gene Houston, one of my favorite writers, said neo-economics concepts hold some of the most important ideas on the future of capitalism. This is a rich and illuminating rethinking of evolutionary economics. Howard Putnam, he was the former CEO of Southwest Airlines here. Powerful information and a flight plan to take your organization to the next level. You want to be on the leading edge of if you want to be on the leading edge of transformation, here is your opportunity. Jeff Saltzman, associated with the Denver group in Integral, referring to Saeed's book, a virtuoso understanding of spiral dynamics, model of evolution, and a brilliant application of his explanatory power to the dismal science of economics, it goes.
Wow, that's the first one I hear from Jeff. That's wonderful.
So, please welcome me and welcome Saeed to the Center of Integrative Psychology.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, Tom, if I had an introduction like that every time I spoke, I'll be a famous and rich man.
They take me with you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. Thank you all for being here tonight. You believe it, we're just 4 days away from what could be considered one of the most important elections in recent U.S. history. We're all going to go out and vote Tuesday, right?
Yeah, we haven't already.
Keep America mediocre?
Once. Just one.
Above average? Just once. You know, 3 months ago when I first gave the title of my lecture tonight to Vicky here at the center, I had no idea that when I went to do some research to augment my presentation tonight, that I'll be running into so much noise and clutter and surface assessment of what was happening, how we got here, and what we need to do to get out of it. Even, you know, our most prominent media out there has fallen into this polarized toxicity that has become today's politics. It has gotten to the point where many scholars believe that this really presents an extreme danger to the very fabric of our democracy. But if you're someone like me and many of you here who believe in evolutionary complex systems, you know that what's happening is the decline of a complex system that is in place, that no longer serves the needs of its people, and the birth of a new system that is struggling to identify itself. So we've seen a hand of about half of the crowd here is familiar with spiral dynamics. Most of the presentation tonight is based on spiral dynamics. There are some concepts being used from the field of large-scale psychology. This is an applications of spiral dynamics field that Dr. Beck pioneered in South Africa and with my beautiful wife in the Middle East. We'll use some of these concepts from that principle. But you know, eventually I was able to find some real good work online that fits nicely into what we have to discuss here tonight. The first piece of published work was published in the British Medical Journal just about 2 weeks before the British decided to leave the EU. And it has to do with anxiety. Now, the first 3 bullet points on there are not really my area of expertise, but they tie in nicely into this. I'm sure many of you here can articulate anxiety and fear a lot better than I do. But what it says is that the prefrontal cortex part of our brain, the region that is responsible for rational decision making, gets affected when we experience anxiety. And the more anxiety we experience, the less and less rational decisions we make. And if we really push to the edge, we not only make irrational decisions, we begin to make decisions that are in the opposite of our best interest. And they refer to theories from behavioral economics and justify the whole thing. And this sort of leads naturally into how...
You just said something. I didn't hear what it was.
Jack, turn that off. The concept of anxiety and fear sort of fits nicely into how politicians on the right have been able to use fear tactics to force their constituents to make uninformed decisions. So if you're someone who receives a flyer, or you see a billboard that is sponsored by the political party that you belong to, and it says something like, I don't know if you can see the background of that, the breaking point. You see a line of immigrants, tens of thousands of them, waiting in line to enter Europe. The UPIC, the right political party in England, used that to spread fear in their constituents to vote for the Brexit vote. So if someone from your political party puts an ad up, a billboard, or sends you a mailer that says, immigrants are coming, they're coming to take your jobs, they're going to spread crime, and they're going to be terrorists, you really don't take the time to analyze the merits of that statement. This is your own tribe that's telling you this. Right away, you get on the defensive, and you want to act, and you want to stop that from happening. So what do? You exercise your autonomy and independence, and you vote for the person who's going to make sure that something like this does not happen. Okay? We've seen a lot of that in what's happening with supporters of Donald Trump and pretty much any other right-leaning party in Europe. The other piece of research I was able to find was published by the 2016 World something report, World Risk Report. And what it basically says is that the increase of catastrophic events, or just catastrophic events themselves, contribute a lot to increasing that level of anxiety and fear in people. And that catastrophic events over the last 2 years or so have grown exponentially. We're not just talking about, climate change and environmental degradation that affects most of us. We're talking about the primary reason that Europe is having to deal with the movement to the right, and that is the forced migration of people from countries that are experiencing war. The Middle East, Syria and Iraq, Afghanistan, of course, and the rest of North Africa. There are millions of people knocking at the doors of Europe, seeking shelter in safe places. Now, traditionally, Europe has been a very accommodating place, especially after the end of World War II. It's very diverse. It is quite a culture that integrates immigrants well into its separate nations. But when you get an exogenous event like this, they've gotten used to assimilating immigrants at their own base. But this is an event at the scale of catastrophe. And Europe can no longer move to the left. It already is at the extreme of the left. And when you're presented with an exogenous problem like this, as a way for the system to handle it, because it cannot possibly deal with the situation as a natural way for the system to handle it, it begins to move back to the right. And that's how you stop an event like this from really becoming a dominant event that takes over the European values. It's just the system automatically moves to the right, and you're beginning to see the right, the rise of political parties to the right, pretty much everywhere in Europe. It was on the rise before this major event that has to do with forced migration. It has shifted completely to the right now, where people believe that, yes, those people on the right were right. We should have listened to them earlier. Look at what's happening now, and we are incapable of handling that situation. The last piece of information I found fits nicely into the work that I do with evolutionary economics, and it is a piece of research that was published by the IFO Center for Economic Studies in Munich, and we'll get into that and the details of it in a little bit.